So welcome to Wealth Revolution, the podcast where we break free from the old financial system, explore the new economy, conscious wealth, and personal freedom. And I'm your host, Luke Halford, and today we have a special guest joining us. Our guest today is Ross Wilson, founder of Evolving Heights, and this is a platform exploring identity, inner stability, and aligned growth. And his work really focuses on how our internal state and self-image and our nervous system shapes the results we experience in life. And I think this episode really connects around developing a wealth mindset. And this is always one of my favourite areas. Often I think it's overlooked, but in my opinion, it's probably one of the biggest needle movers in any area around wealth building. And I think most people think of wealth as about something to get into, to build around strategy, information, or timing. But to some degree, it is. But I think the real challenge is internal. It's all around our identity, which really shapes the behaviour and emotional regulation, or what I call, the vibration. And I think that makes a huge difference if you've done any of that kind of inner work. And yeah, I'm going to bring Ross in now. And before we get started, around that, I'd just like to ask you, Ross, what actually led you into this work? What's the background and story around that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Luke. I really appreciate it. And I think there's a lot that you said there that I resonate with already. And I think anyone that possibly has an insight to anything around mindset, vibration, wealth, they probably went through or discovered it through a channel of business. I certainly, a few years ago when I got involved in property, I remember the going to a weekend event. We're talking where I was introduced to the idea of investing in property, and I was more interested in the fact that the presenter, the lead guy, he had wrote a book all about property, but he actually wrote a book about the mindset, and I thought, isn't that so interesting? Why would someone talk to me about all these strategies and things about property and investing, but then they would write a completely different book separate to that about mindset and talk about that mainly? And I suppose that gripped me more than anything. As much as I went down that journey of property investing and deal trading and things, that was me dipping my toe in the water there. I was fascinated by probably something that I hadn't realised that I'd been touching on previously through just audiobooks. And I was on my commute to work once upon a time. I then got I've discovered, I know this is probably how we met a couple of years ago, by then starting to get involved in various different development courses online and in person. And I just found myself going down a series of rabbit holes and almost like cherry picking to say, okay, what are we talking about here? What's the magic sauce, so to speak? What are all these different components and how do we bring them together to start aligning more with what we want? How do we understand ourselves better? How do we understand how to lead more fulfilling lives? And I suppose it's just been born from that over time.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, the rabbit holes of what they call self-development and mindset just go so deep. There's almost like layer after layer after layer, and of it, and you can really, really go deep on it. And I feel for me, it's personally very life changing. But I know you talk a lot about identity. It is an area I've covered myself a lot. And the identity, how shifting our identity can really shape the results and experience. When you say like
Mm.
shifting identity, what do you actually mean by that? If you were to describe it in, I guess, to put it in practicality or real life scenarios for those that don't,
Yeah,
never really come across that expression of changing your identity and thinking of it in that way, I guess is one thing
totally. Because I mean,
to
I
get
think
to.
when you say identity, what do you mean by that? And probably me myself, I wouldn't even be able to uh, bring that into a nutshell. But I suppose I think about it three things when I think about identity. You could even say what you identify with. I what
Oh,
are is your belief system? Okay, what are your thought patterns? What are your emotions? That's really what makes up the key component of your identity. Which, if you think of it this way, I always think that that's what colours the lens in which you view and experience life. Really,
yeah.
because when you think about it, you are effectively born into this world, and you do not have any preconception about anything, about how things work. You don't have belief systems about things being positive or negative. It's like a blank canvas. And the beauty of this is that we are all here and we are all experiencing life, but we're all having very different experiences of it. And what we seem to think is that it's outer circumstances and events that need to change before we feel better about ourselves, before we start having a more enriched, abundant, wealthier life and all its guises. But really, when you start looking, just simply as you said, it's more inner work. It's rather than looking outward for answers and more looking, okay, what is the meaning and the definition that I give this? Where did that definition come from? How is that? What color or lens is that giving me of this situation? Because that's really how we're experiencing things. And it really colours, how our relationship with money, our relationship with business, our relationship with partners, with our health. It really cuts across everything. And it's not something many of us are aware of because, and I kind of always use the example of my clients. I mean, I work with a lot of really driven individuals who are quite successful in life and in business. And what many of them find themselves is that they're ready for that next level of success. And I help them really shift their internal identity so that they're no longer chasing success, but they're aligning with it. And what that means is that rather than two people sitting down and say, watching this um, recording just now, I mean, going to have the exact same dialogue. They're going to witness us saying the exact same words. They're going to hear the same things, see us. One person might take a lot of value from it and really enjoy it and find it quite inspiring. Another person might have already signed out. They might have said, this isn't for me. I don't enjoy it. But they're watching the same thing. The thing is no different. So what is it? It is the lens in which they view it. It is the experience that they have of it is very real. Both are true for that individual. But what shapes that experience is the narrative that they tell themselves, the belief system, the lens in which they look at it from. And that's really what life is about. It's really having an awareness of what is the internal atmosphere like that is really influencing your experience of something. So that if you want to experience different results, you realize that it's not something outside of you that needs to change, it's the inside. That's where you start to work with someone's identity, i.e., their belief system, their internal thought patterns, and their emotional state.
Right, yeah, yeah. I totally agree with what you're saying there. It really does make a huge difference. I think I had one mentor once said, even any goal's not really about the goal, it's about the person you have to become to achieve the goal. And it really resonated with me at the time.
Totally.
It's like, yeah, it's about the journey of becoming that person. You kind of shift and change into a different person almost when you achieve new goals. It really is a key part of it, I think, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, look, I mean, everyone always says that, don't they? We say it's not about the goal. It's not about the
It kind of is
destination.
a
It's
bit,
about the journey. It's about the becoming process. And we're all like, yeah, everybody into that. But give me the goal. That's what we kind of say to ourselves. With months for me, I think springtime is all about clarity and direction. But one thing that I say to people, and I've been saying it all this week actually, is what we effectively do a lot of the time if you think of your ego, your egoic mind, your conscious mind, what it usually does is it takes a goal, a desire, or something you want, and it generally puts it on a pedestal. So you kind of think, okay, when I get that thing, then I will feel X. Okay, when I get that partner, I will feel loved and appreciated. When I get that next promotion or that next business or this deal, then I will feel successful. When I reach that level of income, then I will feel wealthy. So, what are we doing here? We are making our internal state, our placing our value on something external, something almost in the future. We're creating a bit of gap in separation. And I always say to my clients, you cannot experience anything in your physical reality that you are not conscious of having, or as you said, which you are not conscious or the vibration of. Okay, your egoic mind will want to, experience that thing, but your soul, the part of you that really wants to experience it, really, as you said, it's more about who you become in the process. And that is where you start to make internal shifts, where you start to become a match for that which you want, when you start thinking like the version that's already got it, when you start feeling the emotions, giving your nervous system almost like a test of those chemicals that would be released if you already had the thing, so that then you can start moving from a very different state. And that's what embodiment is, an alignment, when you start thinking, feeling, and acting from the version that's already got the thing. So there's a very big difference between working towards and working from.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So in terms of wealth, what kind of identity shifts do people need to be thinking about to, I guess, to get the biggest financial breakthrough? Because there's a lot of resistance there sometimes, aren't there? You know, you can feel a lot of things do come up when we start to talk about financial goals. I can remember, I recently achieved a higher level of monthly income from my business a few years ago that I never would have dreamed of before, but I don't really know how I did that. I think I did shift my identity, but to
Totally.
yeah. What's the? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what needs shifting it to achieve a financial breakthrough you could never really think you could achieve? Does that make sense? Yeah,
Yeah, totally. Well, the first thing is, well, as I said before, you need to know, first of all, what the goal is. And one thing I would say with if you're talking about purely a financial goal, why do you want that number? I mean, money needs a purpose. It doesn't just going to come to you because you pick a number out of thin air. You need to have a reason for that number. What does that provide? Because it's like a vacuum that needs to be filled. It's not as if it needs somewhere to go. So you need to think about what is that money going to be used for? And why am I being driven by that, first and foremost? Is that something that is going to give me things that I truly love and desire? Or is it just going to give me a bit of something that I think that I want based upon what other people have, what I see around about me? So it's very important to find out what's driving me first and foremost for that goal, that desire, before you even thinking about setting something. So I would always
yeah,
say to my clients, do a little bit of work around that. The second point about aligning with that desire, once you know what you want, and you actually are clear about your why, it's then about understanding, okay, it's like putting into the sat nav, this is my end destination, but you need to know where your starting point is, So you kind of need to understand, okay, if that's where I'm going, where am I at? What is the starting point? So, what is the identity? What is the thoughts, the belief systems that I have that is generating the current results effectively? So, that's like shining a spotlight over, okay, so I'm currently earning X. What do I believe about this? Okay, what do I think about this? And and then I almost like do like a side by side comparison. If, say, I'm earning, I don't know, £10,000 per month, but I want to earn, I don't know, £50,000 per month, quite a bit of a leap. So what does this person think? They think probably that they are worth £50,000 per month, that they give enough value that is of that, if you're talking solely through business or jobs. I had a very different view about abundance and wealth, by the way. But when I bring it solely down to financial, then you need to think about, if I'm doing it through that channel, then I need to have a belief system of that version of me that thinks that they are capable and worthy of generating 50k months, 100k months, whatever it is. It's just a number at the end of the day. You can put another digit on it, but it all comes down to your relationship with that. So then we need to know what our starting point is, understand what the thoughts are, the belief systems, and then do a like by like comparison. Then we can start to actually do the inner work through, and I do this with clients through a bit of mindset coaching, a bit of neuroscience work, and alignment practices to really start bridging the gap, so to speak.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. So I know another subject you talk about a lot is about being comfortably stuck. I thought this sounded like a really interesting subject to explore. So I did write that question down.
Yeah.
What do you mean by this? Where do some people never break through to new levels, or what does that comfortably stuck actually look like? I guess is a question that come
I
up for
mean, I
me
think
when you said this.
we are always there, because
Yeah,
I think we always get to that point, because I think what you need to remember is where you find yourself at this very moment. You yourself, me just now, anyone tuning in, is that there's a version of you, maybe say 2, 3 years ago, that would probably think that certain things that you've achieved and done, it can't really see the how,
yeah,
and it seems to fit. And that version of you thinks, if I just get X, Y, and Z, then I'll be happy. Okay, and you've probably done so many things and achieved many things, and you've almost like forgot about them. Okay,
Yeah.
and we take it for granted. And the reason why so many people come to a point where um, what you could use an example of, I think about myself when I was in a job at one point, climbing a corporate ladder. I had a lot of perks, financially quite well off and things. And there was a previous version of Ross many moons ago that I thought, oh, I just get that job. If I just get that grade, I'll be made, I'll be happy. But what you really need to understand is that part of our being is for further growth and expansion. So there isn't ever going to be a point where you're just going to make it and then it's going to say, right, take the cop out, that's you. This is the top level that you can reach in life. It is always a journey of evolving and further expansion because that's really what your soul is seeking. It is seeking
Yeah.
expression of life through you. It's looking to experience more. So that element of people feeling uncomfortably stuck is usually when your belief system hasn't caught up with the future identity, i.e., the problem of of staying where you are and coping with things that you do not like, whether it be a job that doesn't fulfill you or that you've outgrown, whether it's a relationship that no longer serves you. That problem, that thing that you no longer desire, is more familiar to you, and thereby the idea of something beyond that that might look a lot better actually seems far more scarier or far more of a risk that your primitive conscious mind, almost like what subconscious mind doesn't want to actually venture into because the familiar is almost in safety, even if it doesn't align with your goals, even if it doesn't, serve what your higher, more expansive version of you is seeking. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah. I, yeah, I've come across this many times myself in my life. It's I've always believed that I need to grow, but some people do get really stuck, don't they, in that? And I think it can become almost dangerous to be staying in your comfort zone at some point. I think you find that life catches you up anyway. Something will happen anyway to kind of almost shift you back into growth if you're not careful. I think I had one mentor that used to say,
Oh,
the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, it'll always give you a tap on the shoulder if you're not going in the right direction, but eventually it'll hit with a baseball bat if you don't, if you don't move or grow. You almost need to be growing, as you say. I think another expression I heard
totally. I
was,
think,
yeah, there you go. Sorry.
I was just going to say on that point, I think, there's a danger with staying in a particular zone far beyond, its season. It's like almost if you think about repeating a year at school or something or a course over and over again. You might, but just because you
Yeah.
know it, it feels. We kind of take safety and familiarity as one and the same thing. That's really where your ego, if you like, wants to keep you in what's known and familiar. That's really
Yeah.
why so many of us don't push ourselves beyond what's comfortable, even though the only constant is change, to be fair. So it does happen to us. But equally, I think there's an element where people can almost not take enough time to stop and appreciate what's going on because they're always pursuing something else. So I think there is a bit of a fine line. But don't get me wrong, in
Mm.
today's modern society, I think so many people, the majority, stick in that what's known and familiar. This is my zone, this is my lane. And there are a few that potentially are always chasing that shiny carrot, I suppose. And I think it's really about, as you said at the beginning, it's a balance, it's a dance, and it's almost being able to almost remember and stop and smell the roses as you go along.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always found it to be like almost like a harmony. You've got to tune into it, and there's a really,
Mm-hmm.
I resonated with what you said about sometimes I've done it myself. You're pushing too hard. You're not actually feeling good. You're almost pushing for the next thing all the time. Once you can kind of almost get addicted to that constant change and growth. So yeah, I resonate with
Mm-hmm.
what you say about the appreciation and gratitude for what growth you've had so far can really be helpful sometimes. Yeah,
Totally. And I think, it's something that we all strive for. We all strive to be in a position where we have more prosperous relationships, where we feel good in our skin, where we feel like we're doing something that we feel generally excited by and that gives value. And we also want that sense of growing and evolving different experiences in our life. And I think that's a very built-in mechanism. And I think we are exposed to so much in the world where it's a bit of a hustle and bustle culture where some people fall under one doctrine, where it's a climb a corporate ladder or something, and be associate a lot of your identity with the job or whatever that you do, or a title or an income, and that becomes what we really clutch at. And without that, we don't really know who we are. So there's that, kind of camp of people. There are other individuals who potentially are, as you said, always striving because they've been really brought up in a culture that says push more, do more. That again comes down to a case of trying to prove themselves to the world. And equally, there's a lot of people that I know and have worked with that end up getting involved in strategies and doing things not because it makes them happy, not because it's aligned with what their highest excitement, but because it's about making money. And they can have a lot of money, but they can equally be very unhealthy inside. They could be doing something they hate. So it's about trying to find something where you're not taking forced action, where you feel a little bit more in flow. And there's ways in which we can go about doing that. But I don't think it's something that we're also widely taught or many of us are in tune with.
I mean, what would you say to somebody who, say, with us watching and they've felt like that they feel they're in a comfort zone, or a type of person who maybe feel like they're in a job and they want to get out and they want some change, but they're maybe fearful or just feel stuck, or they don't want to rock the
Yeah.
boat. People often get stuck like this. What would be the first step for someone like that?
Um, so, I mean, as long as your basic needs are met initially, I always think it's important to realize that you can't really create from a place of scarcity or lack. You just can't. You need to be able to make sure that your basic needs are met. But over and beyond that, most people are not really tuned into what they want because they never really ask themselves the question of what they would truly desire. Because what your brain or what your mind's consciously starts to do is it wants to know the how. And what I always explain to people is your physical conscious mind was never created to know what how something is going to happen. It can only process and perceive what is happening. It doesn't really have that capacity. And your brain only receives information. Your job is really to start using some of your tools, if you like. I almost like to say to my clients, think of yourself, your body as being this vehicle that you're using to navigate through life. Okay? You've got certain desires that are calling you in the distance that you're wanting, but you're kind of just shut off to them because you don't know how to get there. You're like, no, not for me, not going down that road. And you've got so many other passengers in the car. And one's telling you to go this way, another's telling you to go that way, that people feel a bit lost in their own mind because they do not know which voice they can trust. And I say to them, you need to actually start using your internal sat nav, which allows you to almost like put in any destination that you want, your imagination, let's say, and not actually get hung up on the full trajectory, how we get there. Because what we realize is that when we actually start using these mental tools to allow what our true excitement is to rise to the surface, we can start to act a little bit like children again. We can start to use this to our advantage to start playing scenes and emotions to connect with potential outcomes that we could experience. But the thing is, you will never really experience anything without giving it more of your focus, more of your attention. And the reason that we aren't doing that is because we've almost lived in, possibly, again, it really comes down to your belief system about what's possible and what you're exposed to, the circle, and a whole host of factors. But there are a whole host of limitations that showing you that what life is meant to be like for you. And it's just not true. So the first thing I would say to someone is to almost like sit down with a blank piece of paper and say, if I had a magic wand, let's do let's give ourselves a little bit of leeway. Let's not say it had to happen next week, but it's in 10 years, 5 years. What would your dream life look like? What would that look like in your health? What would your day look like? What sort of things would you be doing in your business? How much money would you be generating? What would you be spending that money? Allow yourself to kind of dream rather than being numbed off by external influences from the news, from what other people are saying. And when you start to create a bit of space in your life to give more of your attention to what you want opposed to what you don't want, that's when you start to shift the gears. That's when you start to go on a different trajectory. And that's where you'll be supported because life supports you unconditionally. It will support you in your will to see lack everywhere and it'll give you an abundance of that. But it will equally support you in the polar opposite if you start giving your focus and your attention on the things that you truly want. and it will align with that. And abundance is allowing you to do exactly what you need to do when you need to do it without you really necessarily needing to know how it's going to come. Money is just one form, but you can get and do things without actually needing money.
Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So that's what I would kind of say to someone. Act a bit like children again for the first instance.
Yeah,
Use your
yeah, just
imagination.
it's kind of about allowing, isn't it? About not being too stuck up in your own planning. The experiences I've had, it's not being too rigid in a plan. Because, like you say, I'm a very logical thinker, and it took me a long time to let go of that logic. Often set a goal and say, don't be too attached to the plan. You need a bit of a plan. I think you'd probably agree. You need some kind of action. I think that brings me on to there was another part you talked about survival mode. What did you say in my notes? You talked about shifting from survival mode thinking into aligned action. Is that what? Could you explain a bit more about that area? What you
Yeah,
mean by
so I suppose this
because
is
I
maybe
think you've touched on it
similar to what
already, haven't
we've
you, a little bit?
yeah, I suppose we've touched on it opposed to being in your comfort zone versus expansion. This is maybe you can think of it as survival, thriving, growth mindset, closed mindset. There's all different terms and how people label these things. I suppose
Yeah,
one thing for me is this idea, which I struggled with for quite a long time, thinking about, okay, what does aligned action actually mean? Because similar to what you
yeah,
say, I mean, so many of us are caught up in thinking, okay, we need to know the plan, we need to know the how, we work to the plan.
yeah,
And what we need to sometimes this works to our advantage but can also work against us. So when I talk about and when I work with a lot of my clients, it's almost like saying just at the beginning, your conscious logical mind wants to the full roadmap to see it out, so it gives you a sense of safety. Like if I do this, this is going to happen. Um, and that can sometimes work to our detriment if things don't go to plan because we um, we are almost like seeking a bit of a security blanket there. When you start thinking from the goal opposed to thinking of it. This is where you remove yourself from working towards something and you actually take yourself to the end state. And this is what a lot of professional coaches will do with athletes, for example. They will not have, for example, an athlete, a professional runner, think about running a race. They will not even think of them of almost crossing the finish line. They will take them to the end state of the version that has actually won the race. So they will see, okay, take them, and people use a lot of different practices and permission slips to do this. I mean, some people use affirmations, visualization. There's a whole way and tools that you can do this, whatever works for you, really. But it's about really gaining a sense of this is the identity of that version. This is seeing thinking the thoughts of that person, feeling the emotions if I've already run the race, feeling the medal, seeing the time, feeling the sweat, getting your nervous system to actually embrace that version in the now. And this is where you really need to understand your nervous system, your body. It doesn't know the difference between what you experience in reality versus that which you impress upon it through imagination. That's why you've got that, in your toolkit, almost in your armory, to pull out and start impressing that upon you so that you give yourself more of a dosage of what it feels like to be in that end state. And it's from that state, it's almost like I always think to my clients, like, you need to be in harmony with the outcome because that's where the ideas are. That's where the solutions lie. They are not at the version of you that's starting the race. They are the version of you that's already won the race. They know the way because they've already done it. So you don't start at the starting point and try to work it all out and work out the how and the plan. You connect with the end state. And from there, that's where the solutions lie. And to put that into context a little bit more, it's like saying that I always use the example of I'm listening to Spotify or something or on one station and I'm listening to one song, but I want to hear another one. I can want it all day long. I can desire to hear that other song, but it's already playing. It's not waiting for me to flip the dial before it starts playing. All I need to do is I need to become one with it. I need to connect with that so that I can hear the music. So you need to connect with the end state so that you can actually think like the version, feel like the version, and it's from that the actions naturally become aligned because you're already in that. You're operating as that version. You start to see opportunities that a previous version of you wouldn't have seen because your brain actually will concentrate on that which you give intention and instruction to. If you say things and experience or focus on lack and why things aren't going right, it will validate, it wants to prove you right. So it will come up and give you a full host of reasons validating what you're saying. But if you train yourself to focus on that which you want and how it can be done, it will equally prove that right as well. So it's all about training your focus here and starting to think from the end state backwards. And there's a whole host of ways in which we can do that.
Yeah, yeah, almost like a frequency that you're tapping into. As you use the Spotify example, yeah, it's like tapping into that. Radio always reminds me of a radio, the old school. When you have to tune into the radio, you have to tune in and just find it, and it's makes a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
sense. Catching that vibration
But it is all
makes the
vibrational,
feeling.
it is all energy. If you went
Yeah,
from a
yeah,
neuroscience point of view, I mean, I know you touched in the beginning, some people call it the universe, some call it God. I interchange personally between it all. I think they can all commonly agree on a higher power,
yeah,
something that is greater than them. And I think when I was talking about um, the idea of frequency is in the state, one thing that I go into a lot with my clients is I let them kind of think that they are almost like a walking antenna, effectively. You're always emitting a frequency, and that is really made up of your state. So um, everything is energy, effectively. Everything is just a mass of molecules and atoms, and they're vibrating at different frequencies. That's why everything looks separate and independent, because, and you probably have an awareness of this yourself, it's because they're vibrating at different frequencies. And what distinguishes a glass, I suppose, from sand is that someone's taken one form of energy, the atoms, the molecules within that, and they've manipulated it. They've manipulated it in such a way that they've taken the sand and it's transmitted with paper, or taking one form of energy and we're transmuting it into trees. But we don't really think about our life and our results this way. We don't have this wider understanding that our thoughts, what we focus on and what we give our attention to, is having an impact on our outer reality. The paradox which many people come to when they start to go down this rabbit hole of personal development is they realize that circumstances don't matter, i.e., circumstances don't manifest things, circumstances don't materialize things, circumstances don't matter. The only thing that matters is your state of being. Your state creates your circumstance, law of correspondence. So when you realize that my state as a human being, my state of being is determining that which I experience is everything. And your state of being, I kind of bring down to two things: what you think about and what you feel. I think of it like your mind and what you put your thoughts in, almost like vibration through, just like the same way your phone would if you want to connect with a live stream, and your heart, almost acts like a magnet. And these two things need to speak to each other. Your thoughts and your emotions need to be in harmony. And when you can do that, when you can be congruent and you can think and feel like the version of you that's already got the result, you're not needing it. That's the beauty of it. You're not looking outside of you for something because you can't go looking for something that you are already the vibration of. And that's the paradox, and that's when it shows up. Because you're no
mm,
longer looking for it. You start taking the action, you start being the version, you start doing the things just naturally because you are it. And that's the whole idea of embodiment and aligned action. When you realize that everything is energy, including you, and the vibration that you really operate from is determined by mainly those two things.
yeah,
That's how I
yeah.
start to look at and break things down.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've had experiences with this. Have you got any experiences you can share where, because for me, the experiences I've had, it's almost magic shows up sometimes. It's like there's
Oh, I know.
synchronicities
Oh,
that
I've
can
got
happen
so many.
a while, yeah.
I mean, to tell certain experiences, I think to people almost seem, as we say, quite magical. But when you realise that miracles are the actual natural way of things, they really are.
Yeah.
I mean, we call them miracles, but they're not really. They're just law. It's just a universal law, in just the same way that gravity is. So,
It's like nature, isn't it? Nature's pretty
um,
much full of these sort of miracles and twists, and nothing in nature's
totally.
straight or, kind of logical. It's all all very, it flows and it changes and it's almost a miracle in itself, isn't it? And I think that's what we are, and it's part of
Totally.
that, I think. And yeah,
I think there are quite a few universal laws that we've kind of touched on one there that, which is the law of vibration, like what you put out is what you get back,
yeah,
um, which is, a fundamental law compared to like the law of attraction. But you've got things fundamental. I mean, stories for me, what can I tell you? I mean, they seem quite, to most people, miraculous, but for me, um, I suppose, I mean, some of the biggest ones that I've got over the years are like about being in a bit of debt, and I thought, oh my God, I really need to pay this off. And I thought, I'm not giving, attention and energy to the circumstances. They, you know, got what I desire. And then for this, I was finding like, I would get, I would get debt written off, which was, I was thinking about £14,000 for some reason, and I got two debts written off equally. One was just over 14,000, one was just after within the space of a week. I was needing £1,500 one week for something. And I remember getting
yeah,
a cheque from HMRC from a tax manual of £1,541 and 41 pence one week. I've remembered having experiences where I've had, holidays all paid for, like 2 weeks in Dubai with um, lavish, experiences. Just sometimes when you build up a belief system, and one of the things, that's a very powerful belief. You think, this isn't what I prefer, but it must be happening for my highest good. That might
yeah,
sound quite delusional to a lot of people. But what I kind of like to say to people is think of it this way. Think of yourself almost like being a pawn on a chessboard. You can't see the full picture, you know, And I kind of think you need to think about this that there's a higher version of you, a higher mind, if you like. You might want to call that God, the universe, spirit, whatever. But it can see the full. You don't need to see the full roadmap. You just need to know the next aligned step because everything's always moving and everything's always changing. So it is effectively if you keep your signal steady, if you keep your focus on the state of the version of you that's got the outcome that you desire, irrespective of what goes on outside of you, then you're not chopping channels. You're not hearing a bit of one song, then a bit of another. You are steady. And that's what we need to regulate. You need to regulate your state on the outcome that you want. And things will show up as synchronicities. They will come through channels which you potentially otherwise wouldn't have planned. This is why it's important to almost, as you said, map out potentially what your goal, take the aligned steps that you want, but don't be too rigid. And the reason that you don't be too rigid is because if you are too rigid, the outcome could be far greater than what you imagined, and you limit yourself. Or if you come through a different channel that you almost block because you say to yourself, no, it has to happen this way. So you take the aligned steps from the state of having, but you remain open that it could happen at any point, by any means. It could happen sooner than you like. It could happen after, but it doesn't matter. You almost surrender to the how and the when, and
yeah.
this is where you embrace the journey, so to speak, because the journey is the destination.
Yeah, yeah, I really resonate with that. What you're saying about it's almost like a paradox, isn't it? The surrender side to it. It really is. It's kind of when you want something, but you're okay if you don't have it, and it's a I always find it very paradoxical, but yeah, there's a real sweet spot to it, and it is. I think it's easy but hard at the same time, and I think it takes a lot of
It
practice.
is.
And yeah, I mean, what's some
It
of the
does.
practices you find that really help sustain that vibration? For me, it's always been a lot of the most common things that people do, like meditation and exercise, and whether it's saunas and ice baths, that these all help me stay in a better vibration. I've always found those things to be good for me personally, a lot of the physical stuff. But there's a ton
Totally.
of things out there, and everybody does different things. I'd just be interested to hear some of your views around what you do to stay in that
Yeah.
vibration.
So I think what you want to do is totally right in what you're saying there, is that you want to kind of keep yourself as much as you can in a positive vibration, in a positive state,
Yeah,
because that helps keep you more in an elevated, connected state, if you like, with um, I don't know, you've got many different names for it. If people, if you want to call it God, if you want to call it your higher self, you want to maintain a positive outlook, if you like. Not
Yeah.
positive thinking, not false positivity. You want to be able to raise your frequency. And that's everything about levels of vibrational energy, LOVE. So if you go from a state of love, you will keep yourself in a positive state. So you're absolutely right. Things that you would do generally throughout that are through genuine emotion and gratitude for small things, in your life that are happening day by day, by doing things that you enjoy, that you lean into, following your highest excitement as much as you can. These are things that will help you keep you in an elevated emotion, especially even when things happen that are not to your liking. If you have the belief system that this is serving me, even if it's to let you know that you do not prefer that thing, so it allows you to know what you do prefer, then it served you. As long as you take from every situation that is serving your highest good and find the positive, because there has to be. There can't not be an element of positivity in even things that are perceived as not your preference. Equally, the bad also exists in the good. It's just depending on where you put your focus. So that's one thing to keep your emotions high, because that's something that is a practice. It really is. And you can do that in a whole host of ways, like you mentioned there. But the other thing you were asking about is paradox, which, and it is a tricky one when you think about surrendering to the process, but you want the process to happen now. Is it happening? One thing to do that is to almost like build up a bank of an inventory, to almost like, this is my reference point, to say, what are all the things that have happened before that didn't maybe happen how I wanted, but how have I built and developed my trust in the process? Okay, what you can refer to when you're having those moments where you're doubting yourself. What were those moments that are synchronistic or magical? And some people might start with simple things like manifesting a parking space or a pen or something. Now, I wouldn't say to do this, when you're trying to, if you're new to practices like this and try to do it for major things. No, start small. Start to build up that inventory of, okay, this is interesting. Well, this is supporting me. That's a good point in terms of having a bank of information you can refer to. Also, when you find those moments of doubt, if you've clearly started to say there's one particular goal that you are, or something that you're working towards out there that you really want, I always say to my clients is, um, okay, you talked about visualization there. That visualization is very important. What you want to do here at this point, there's a few components to it, but you want to ideally cut out all external circumstances. You might want to call it meditation, mental rehearsal, whatever you want to label it as, visualization. You want to be able to almost like steady the body, sitting down, lying down, cut out the external circumstances, and even just take a few deep breaths in through your nose, exhale through your mouth, elongate it just to slow down your thinking. And then have one mental picture, just one, where it implies that the outcome's already done. Okay, so, and I want you to think of it as if you're looking through your eyes. A lot of people do this where they're thinking of a scene, but you need to think from it, like the version of you that's already got it. So if it's a certain outcome where a deal has went through, or that you've been in a certain relationship, I don't know, it could be anything. It could be a thing that you're doing in your health and your fitness, we use that example of the marathon. Just create one scene. What would you see? What would you hear? What would you smell? What would you, if you were sitting in a seat, what would the chair feel like? What clothes would you be wearing if you were looking down at yourself? Just create one scene. Then think about all the things like, what would I be thinking? About this. Oh my God, I can't believe it's happened this way, or I'm so grateful for this. What would you be feeling? The emotion is far more powerful. Emotions and feelings are far more greater than thoughts. But once you've got that scene, use that and then let it go. Do not become too hung up on the scene, because you just use that as a tool, as a permission slip to get you in the state of having. And then once you've got that, return to it. That is your dwelling space. You make that the space that you go to often throughout your day, even for 60 seconds. You return there. You make that the place that you go to at night before you go to sleep. You drift into it. And it's not just about the scene, remember, it's more about the emotion. You're using the emotion in these things to stimulate a sense of having. And the key difference is to bring it into the now. Do not make it like, oh, I can't believe this is coming or it's on the way. It needs to become your present. This is who I am. This is what's happening to me now. And that's how you connect with the outcome. That's how you would continually regulate your state, by connecting with that channel. That's the way to do it, because this is where you start working with the law of assumption. And the more that you do that, it becomes less of a fantasy, and you spend more time dwelling and living in that mental atmosphere, that it cannot help but reproduce something that matches that vibration, that frequency, because that's you. And that's the way life works.
Yeah.
It's the law of correspondence. It just has to.
Yeah, raising that vibration. Yeah, it's got me thinking about like in my journey with it. Sometimes I feel I don't know if you've experienced this or anybody else has who's watching, but sometimes I get tests. So things, I get a goal in my mind and something will come up to almost. It feels like it's happening to challenge me, and it's sort of almost like a test. Have you ever come across this? I don't know. I find that the most challenging area. This kind of work. I don't know if you've come across that as any areas where you can help people in that way. Say it's like a really challenging situation that really contradicts your goal, and it's going to test you to hold that vibration or do any of these practices because it almost pulls you in the opposite direction. Have you ever come across this? I don't know if that's some mindset thing for me personally, or does that make sense? That question?
So I suppose when you think about it, yeah, well, when you think about any goal or any desire, it's going to challenge you in different ways, in the sense
yeah,
that it's going to force you to do something that is not in harmony with where you are normally. So it is going to feel uncomfortable. It's the
like
same way
outside
as
your comfort
almost
zone,
like
I guess. Yeah,
well, if I think of it like if you're planting a new seed in something, in or even in the ground, there is going to be growth there. You're going to be expanding against those walls, within the shell, wanting to expand, and almost that's going to be uncomfortable. So the discomfort is part of the process,
yeah,
effectively. It's not something that can be avoided, but it's really your relationship with realizing when you are in that zone, saying, okay, I'm supposed to feel this way, so that you don't feel like this is an alien experience, when you realize this is actually a good thing, because it must mean that I'm growing. It must
yeah,
mean things are changing. Because if it wasn't, if nothing was changing, if you weren't feeling that, then it must mean things are still staying the same.
yeah. That's good
So I suppose it's just about
perspective.
the definition and the label that you
Perspective, I
give it.
guess. Yeah, yeah.
Totally.
It's all about the perspective. Yeah, it makes sense. So, yeah, where should we go with this next? So, you got anything you want to add or you want to get into? Let me think. We had. I've got
I
practical
don't know.
passage from survival thinking into alignment, which we've covered, haven't we? Is there any other areas you want to get into, or we kind of finish up? Or
um, I suppose. Let me think. I think obviously a lot of your listeners and things will be thinking financially, wealth, they want to be really generating more income and things particularly. And all I'll say is, start with identifying your current belief system, because we all have a belief system around wealth and money and what we feel comfortable with.
yeah,
And the thing is, I said it earlier about putting a certain income goal or something on a pedestal. If you do that, what will happen is your money will say, I don't want to be around that person, because
yeah. It's not right.
they're needing me in order to feel valuable. They're needing me to give them that sense of being worthy. So do not place your sense of self worth on the thing. You want to almost be in a point where you are able to identify, okay, what must I believe is true? What is the belief system that is generating this outcome that I've got just now? Okay. Then I say, okay, what must the version of me that's generating that income or got that level of success, what must they believe is true? What definition are they giving to certain things? And when you can identify what narrative, what meaning you're attributing towards something, that's when you can actually change that, because that's really what we're doing here. We're all just about taking a belief system, the lens in which we're looking at it, and saying, okay, I need to change that. Okay, because I've got a relationship here with that. And you might find that you've got a relationship with money which keeps you in a pattern of scarcity thinking. You might think that that money isn't something that can hang around, or that you can't handle large amounts of money, whether that be conscious or subconscious, and in which so you will prove yourself right unless you deal with that root belief. Because there are many people that are highly successful, and it's one thing to generate income, it's another thing to keep it or to develop it further. So if you are someone that has had, like many people do, many people gain a lot of wealth through strategies and taking a lot of action, which is really good. But if they do not change the internal thermostat, to align with that new version, that new level of income, you will default back to your original setting. Whether you do that consciously or unconsciously, you cannot really outwork this, unfortunately, which is, a little bit frustrating for us at times because you think you put in a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of effort, you've got some results, and then they flutter away. And we kind of think, well, it happened because of this thing out here, that thing, and we are a lot of the time unbeknown to us that these things had to happen because circumstances don't matter, states of being matter. Your state, this is why I found clients and things, people that have came into windfalls, but then what happens that next month and they've got unexpected bills or or something, last minute happens and they think, oh, well, that's typical, isn't it? And of course, their assumption, their expectation about it hasn't changed. So life had to deliver circumstances and events that they might think is trying or challenging them, but it just is conforming to their belief system, their assumptions. So we really need to think about seeing themselves as someone who is able to continually and generate that level of income that is worthy of that, that can create value and acts differently. So that's what I would say to anyone who is maybe looking to get that next level of income or who is perhaps found themselves with temporary success or fleeting success is to identify, did my belief system change? Did what I think about in relationship to money, did that change? Because if it didn't, then even if you went and got the same results again, you would naturally default back to where you were. So it's very important for most people, and you can look at anyone. I think this is something that more and more in this space of whether you're investing in crypto, whether you're investing in property, whatever it might be that you're doing, more and more people are giving so much attention to, okay, what is my identity? What is my state like? Because it's not so much about what you do, it's about the state that you operate from whilst you do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree. So really, we've come full circle back to the identity stuff, and I think that's where the biggest shifts happen because until you change that, it's so subconscious that you, like you say, you do it in a way. I've had money before where I've gained money and found myself almost like getting rid of it, but not getting rid of it consciously. It's like, how did that all go?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, and it's all down to this belief: am I worthy of that? And as I explored that subconscious, I found all these different kind of belief patterns that I'd forgot about when I was younger, and I think that's where the real deep work. I guess you do this kind of work as part of your coaching anyway. To change that identity because that's where the biggest shifts happen. I think in changing that.
Well, I mean, everything that you've got is formed up your identity, as you're probably aware. Many people are where come the age of 7 or 8, then they say that you've almost developed a sense of, okay, this is how life works. This is how I navigate. I've got patterns and belief systems around certain things, and we carry that through into adulthood. And
Yeah.
really, I believe you can't change what you're not aware of. So you do need to get an understanding, as I said initially, of what's the starting point, what's my belief system, and you don't need to actually spend so much time unrooting all of that. By the way, you don't need to go into your family affairs and things to change that because you do know. This is where a lot of people will pay thousands of pounds of money for people just to hypnotize them and say, just give me a quick solution. Whereas it really comes down to um, yeah, having an aware, there's certain things that you can do by releasing old emotional wounds, so that you're not carrying in your nervous system a lot of whether it be trauma, whether it be bad experiences, whether it be, resentment, anger, that's all stored. And you need to clear space within your nervous system for more of what you truly want to land. I kind of think of it in the same way as if you wanted a new wardrobe full of clothes, and you want to go out shopping. You don't wait until you don't go shopping and then come back and try and make space. You make space first, and then you can go out and buy new clothes because you'll always fill it. Because the universe loves a vacuum. It's the same as someone who wants a partner. You don't go sleeping every night in a single bed, or you go, or buy a double. If you want somebody else in your life, you start creating light space in your life for them. You start creating space in your wardrobe. You start creating space beside you. Don't sleep in the middle of the bed. I mean, I know this can sound quite banal and silly, but you need to start training yourself to not to think like the version of you that's already got what you want in small, simple ways. And this is where the neuroscience comes in, and we start to explain how we can almost rewire your brain, like through neuroplasticity and things. But yeah, it's very much about being aware of what's the desire, what's the driver, why do I want that? Okay, is it in alignment with what I truly want, what I would love to create, okay, what is my belief system around that currently, but is not in alignment, and what would that future version of me think or believe to be true if I did have that, and then we start to impress that as a new belief. And that's
Yeah.
really what the work is. And when you've got that new lens, that new belief system, you start seeing life differently. You start interacting differently. You start experiencing it differently. And that's how your world changes. That's how your life evolves from the inside out.
Yeah, inner world creates the outer world. I think that's some of the big takeaways from this. If whoever's listening, I think it's, we're seeing that to get the results, it's not really a strategy problem. It's more an identity problem, or a change, shift in identity and a shift in vibration. And this stuff's really powerful. I
Totally.
can't stress enough, especially in terms of anything.
Oh,
It's not, wealth comes in many areas, don't it? It's not just money. It's, health and relationships and whatever, anything else in your life, really. I think it's one of the
oh
most
yeah,
important
totally. I mean, you
areas.
can have a wealth of money. You can have a wealth of joy in your life. You can have a wealth of time. You can have a wealth of beauty. Do you admire things that are around you? Or are you in
Yeah.
someone that's in very scarcity in time? You might have a lot of money, but you have a little poor time to do things. And you need to think about things and wealth and abundance quite more expansively. Because really, why do you want more wealth? Well, you want more wealth and more money so that you can do the things that you want when you want to do it. And I kind of look at and teach things around that's more abundance, if you like, in my mind. And that can come through money, it can come through a trade. I give you something, you give me something, or an exchange of skills or something like that. It can come through opportunities. It can come through synchronicities. There's a whole host of ways. I mean, I kind of like, when you asked me a little about a client or myself and experience. I remember last year, one of my clients, he wanted, I think it was his mum's 60th birthday, and he had a lot of money that he's invested in his business, and he was remortgaging his own place, I think, and had just got that all done up. And he didn't have any money. They wanted to go traveling. And he said, I just want this thing. And I said, right, okay, worked with him for a couple of weeks. And we did some of the things that I touched on when we were talking about here about connecting with his end state, looking at his belief systems. And I remember it within the month or so, he said, Ross, I just need to jump on this call with me. You're never going to believe what happened. And he was telling me how um, his mortgage. I want to say that they had revalued his property and he acquired more money back, so it freed up some finances that he thought he was all in the red in his business. It kind of put things in the green. And as his brothers had actually volunteered just out the blue to pay for his trips to Dubai and somewhere else where they were wanting to take his mum on a luxury holiday, as long as he planned it all without him even asking them and things like that. And so these wouldn't have been ways in which he thought that money or whatever or the abundance to allow him to do what he wanted to do would have come. Most people think it needs to come through the channel of a job or through business, which we do need and we do value. But when I say this is where you surrender almost like to the how and the when, because if you block and say this is the channel in which it must come through, that's
Mm.
where you start to limit yourself. So that was quite a nice wee story, Alex, to think
Yeah,
about
that's
that one.
interesting. Yeah.
But the other thing you touched
Yeah.
on there was you said something to me there about wealth and abundance in from. So there's something else I was going to say that, oh, I can't even remember now.
Yeah.
It's coming,
um,
but I'll come back.
yeah, it's identity, right? Shifting identity. I think we touched on a lot. I feel in this, and yeah, it's gone for me now. We'll see on the, but yeah, I mean, it's been a great conversation. I suppose next things, where can people find you? And when I put the video on YouTube, I'll
Oh,
put that at the bottom anyway, all
I
your details and things like that.
just
Yeah,
remembered. Sorry, I'll jump on there.
yeah, go.
I think when you said about the identity, I think it's because you used the example that there are millions of people, for example, in sales all over the world, even in America or wherever you are in the world, and you can have a whole host of people selling the same thing. And yet, they're maybe speaking to the same demographic, you may have the same sales script, you might have everything the same, but yet only a very small percentage of people are having the high, conversions or results. So then you think about, they're following the same strategy, they've got the same script, they've got the same, pipeline. What is the difference? And they'll say it's belief. They invest a lot of money over the years saying, okay, what is it that makes these people different? And it's simply their belief. They identify with someone that either converts really highly or that is a top salesperson. That's what it comes down to. So when we realize that if we are not congruent with the desire that we want, if our belief system our narrative is out of alignment, then that's what needs to shift. Because you could be taking all the right actions, following all the right strategy. And people might say that you might, over time, which you do, build a belief system incrementally by getting results, by seeing people, by failing. But why not just jump to the end state? Why not just jump to the state where you can operate from the version of you that's already got what you want? You know why? I don't think, it doesn't need to be, this is what people sometimes refer to as the effortless way, but it is really about understanding that that's part of your job as an alchemist. It's to take energy and transmute it into something else. It's to create and to expand. So I just thought I'd add that point that it really does come down to our belief system at the end of the day.
But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's the same thing, really. And when you're letting off that vibration of certainty and conviction, people just, yeah, they go with it. I see this all the time in crypto, things fly up
Yeah.
unbelievably in different ways. And yeah, even a sales call I do myself, as long as you're aligned, you feel good about what you're selling. It doesn't have to be a sales call. It's just about adding value and expressing that vibration. It'll go a lot smoother for me when I've been in business and I feel
Totally.
that's really what sales is about. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I generally find, I mean, I've had over the years my own experience with sales, and some people are hard salespeople, some people like to talk people through, um, I don't know, paradigm shifts. They want to coach and support people. And I suppose for me, I've worked with really successful people selling a lot, and I suppose they're just, um, there's values in there that I need to, and principles that I don't always like to cross. I always like, as you said, to think about, okay, what value am I giving? Whether or not they engage or come and work with me, as long as we've had a good conversation, you've given value. There is a law of reciprocity. Like I said, is what you give out is what you put out is what you get back. And it doesn't necessarily mean that what you put out will come back through the same channel. I remember even like the other week that I had a client that, it's funny. That I worked with last year. And, they said that they were going to be coming back and working with me. They didn't, and things. I was like, fine, it's okay, whatever. They've got a lot going on in their life. And I was giving them support and the margins and things. And then they had referred someone that ended up, coming on a call with me a couple of weeks ago to work with. And then subsequently, they ended up even working with me as well, coming back to me. And I think it's one of those ones when what you really resist or create a lot of tension and friction around that really almost repels things. So this is
Yeah.
where I said, if you are someone that has a real grasp and a want and a need for something, then it implies separation. And you cannot have that which you are not already. So if you are someone that is finding yourself saying, I really want this, I really need this, then you are not it. So it can't come to you, it can't find you because you're not on the same wavelength. So this is where you're coming back to signals and connection, where you go back inwardly. You connect with the version of you, cutting off your senses that can feel and see as if you've already got it. And that's when you start to impress upon yourself, and this is biology actually, the vibration of your cells start vibrating at a different frequency because you become it, quite literally, the version of you that's got it. And the job that you have then is to connect more with the end state and not becoming a victim to outer circumstances. Um, that's really when what we call magical or synchronicity becomes your new norm.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate a lot with what you were saying about. I call it my language of be reducing the importance of something. It kind of frees up the energy. I really find this in money. The more you let it flow out, it comes back in. I think one year I spent a lot of money on mentors, and some of the mentors ticket prices were very high, and there was a bit of resistance
Mm,
there. But the more I kind of gave to these mentors, weren't even the mentorship that helped. It was almost the giving of the money more flowed in. It was almost
yeah, totally.
one of those kind of magic or miracle things that we've talked about. Yeah,
But money doesn't like to come to those and to just money loves to set a purpose. So it's
yeah,
not really a case of if you see yourself as a vessel for money, that you're going to become a good custodian of it, if you like, and give it flow and meaning, then it'll be good because it's like one of those people they talk about tithing, for example, as one thing. And there's a very difference between spending or doing things to get, because that comes from lack and scarcity. And it's doing and giving from a place of abundance, because you know that you're always provided for, and that you're always going to be fulfilled. And this is where I say, if you're going to give money away or do things for other people, don't do it with this principle of thinking, well, I'll do that in the universe or whatever will give me more money. You do it because
Right.
you've got it and you're always supported. You do it from a place of prosperity and abundance. Very different vibration, from doing something. And when you're investing in yourself in courses and things, then you see yourself as a good custodian of money, as something that money can trust and feel safe with, and that it's not actually always feeling able to run away from. And I suppose we all have
Yeah.
a very, like foods and diet, it's a very complex relationship we have with money, but it's one that it's important to keep on reviewing and breaking down and revising, I feel.
Yeah, I see it very much as well. It's like energy, isn't it? It's almost like this flow of energy. It's not. It don't really exist, does it? Really? I mean, money's just a made-up thing. It's just this paper and this digits. It's not. It don't really exist as such. So that's one of the ways I usually see it. It's almost a flow of energy, and I think the energy has to flow right. You have to give to receive. Almost like they're both the same thing. It's another one of those paradoxes, I think. Flip side of things, but that's the way I see it often. And when I've operated from that paradigm, I guess, or view, yeah, it seems to work. I seem to receive more. Um, I don't know how it works. I don't question it too much, but that's the way I perceive it a lot of the time. I've noticed and
But
observed when
yeah,
I
so
do
I think you
tighten up,
could quite,
things become tighter. It's interesting.
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
It's exactly as you said, like money is energy, it's an exchange of one form for another. It's like, so you need to think of it. This is why we create channels such as a business and exchange of products or services for money in exchange. It's an exchange of energy, if you like. That is just one
yeah,
channel in which it can come to you. There are an abundance of channels in which it can come to you. But this is where, as I
mm,
said, we don't become too limited. When we think of abundance and why you want money, it's to be able to do certain things or be certain places. Whereas if you have a belief system that you're supported, then you will find that you are supported in that. It's like if you were someone that goes from earning, I don't know, 50k a year in a job to earning £100,000 per year. Your belief system, if you were to lose your 50k K a year job, you're not going to all of a sudden the next day potentially start applying for roles that earn you 150k per year because you've not got the identity or the belief system of that. You
yeah,
would probably feel comfortable applying for jobs of a similar nature. And it's the same, it's just not exactly as you said, it's the definition, the meaning that you give to it. It is just a piece of paper with some digits on it. But it's the meaning and the value that you place on that and your relationship with it.
yeah,
What's the difference between someone paying you £50 an hour versus someone paying you £500 an hour? Well, it's no difference. Are they going to get more time in that hour? No. Have you got so much more skill and emphasis that, is going to be worth 10 times that worth of value? I don't know. You might believe so, another person might not. What's the difference? It's all an inner game. It's all an inner belief and definition. So this is where it's all about. It's quite simple when we realise what it is. We just need to um, give more attention to what we want and align up our identity with that. And that's how we start to see the ripples and the flow.
yeah. Lots to think about. But yeah, I'm going to finish up there, but it's been great having you on, and I've enjoyed these conversations. They're always good. I love to get into this stuff. So I think, as I said, I'll put your details at the bottom of the YouTube video. But is there anywhere where people can find you easily? Where do you hang out mostly? Is it like Instagram or
Oh, I'm on all the
Facebook?
platforms
All of
from
them,
Instagram,
yeah.
Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. So yeah, I mean, even I've got my own private community on skills, so can
Oh,
by all
school
means
group as well. I'll
connect
put
with
that
me
link
there.
in. Yeah,
Yep, they
great.
can connect with me there, and on my website gives some details about the things and programs or coaching or free resources that I offer. So yeah, feel free to check it out. Evolving Heights.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah, thanks again for coming on, and I really enjoyed this. It's been a great chat, and yeah, I'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.